Yes, live.
Okay, thank you. We'll now commence the meeting. 10:30. Could I welcome everybody, and especially David, the new person to replace Peter Aaron. Welcome, Peter. David, rather. Thank you. If we go to apologies, have we got any apologies, Dick?
No apologies.
No apologies. Okay. Could we go on to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 24th of April, 220, page 1. Okay. Let's have a look.
All okay, Chair?
I've got it now. Okay. Any points to like to bring to the attention of the public as regarding the minutes of the meeting? Are they a true and correct record?
I propose those, Chair, because most of the items, I think, are on the agenda.
I second.
Any matters arising?
No.
Okay. Could I now move off then, if there's no matters arising, to urgent items? Any urgent items? No urgent items. Okay.
Yeah, most of the items are on the agenda anyway, I think, regarding the COVID-19 situation.
Okay, thank you. Admission of the public, page 5. Anything there as public? To exclude the public from the meeting, item 4, page 5. Declarations of interest, Mr. Barnes. Any declarations of interest?
Sorry, Chair. No, we haven't had any.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Item 6 for noting, a British Performance Management Report, page 8.
Yes, Chair. If I can introduce that paper, it's Alison Davey. This is to inform members of the authority's performance against key performance indicators, and this is the report for the full year from the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. If I can pass over to Dave Walton, he'll take you through the report and we'll be able to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Chair. If I may just add before I start presenting this paper, I'm hoping or anticipating this meeting may be done by 11:30. But I have to join a call regarding the COVID situation at 11:30 if the meeting is still going. So hopefully, looking at my agenda items, I should be done by then. But if I take you to the report in question at the moment, as Alison has referred to, it is a document that looks at the fiscal year that finished on the 31st of March. As members will be aware, we bring this report in its abridged version to the Audit Committee, where there are red indicators showing. Particularly in this case, it is about the actual rescues. Members will be aware because an iteration of this paper has previously been presented to the Full Fire Authority and to Community Safety Committee only last week. And the actual rescues is a theme that has run through the last reporting year for us. But just to give members some reassurance, the actual rescues as shown is as a consequence primarily of the work that we have been doing with both Yorkshire Ambulance Service and West Yorkshire Police in the field of work which we call medical break-ins. That is where there's an individual who is in a house alone and medical services such as the ambulance need access to them. The Fire and Rescue Service provide a service whereby we will break in if ultimately necessary, but predominantly gain access for them. As this was new when we set this target, actual rescues weren't factored into the target setting, hence it's gone red. Notwithstanding that, if we were to strip the number of those medical break-ins that we did out of the actual rescues target, it does show something in the region of a 13% increase on the year as well. Predominantly, but not exclusively, that is as a consequence of road traffic collisions, which members of the Community Safety Committee will be aware have crept up across the brigade area really. But also actual rescues does include people stuck in, things stuck on people, people stuck up places, etc., etc. It's a very wide-ranging descriptor of an incident type. The second part of the report also goes on to talk about the number of fire-related deaths per 100,000 arising from fires other than accidental dwelling fires. But by definition, that is something, a fire that occurred other than accidentally. And again, members will recall, because we've reported it previously, that we had an unusual number of suicide or deliberate act fires which occurred last year. It's not something that at the moment I would call a statistical trend. It is a blip in the year that it happened that way around, but it is certainly something that we will be keeping our eye on. But certainly that turned the indicators, which are shown on page 14, red, because it was the number of fires which were deliberately caused. Members will be aware, of course, that those are very difficult to affect and manage using our regular prevention activities. And I'll stop there, Chair, and happily take questions.
Okay, David, many thanks for that. Could I put it to the members? Karen, Goa, and then David. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I just, on Dave saying that he's attending a meeting regarding the COVID-19, I'm just wondering what impact that has had on this range of rescues that you've done, and the mental health issues. And I know it's, a lot of people have had domestic problems during the COVID-19. So it'd be interesting if it could be put on the agenda for the next meeting, and as near as possible update, Dave, to the COVID-19 and the impact it's had.
Certainly, if I may, through you, Chair, we will of course give members an update.
The mental health issues. And I know it's,
Sorry, I heard a bit of an echo there. Can everybody hear me okay?
Okay, Karen.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Sorry, if I may, just to answer, we will report back on COVID issues as we have been doing throughout the outbreak. Predominantly, it is difficult to attribute any one particular incident to COVID, but I can say in the broadest of terms that our incident profile, our incident count and incident types are broadly in line with what they were pre-COVID and year on year, and that is also the case nationally as well. We do recognise that there are mental health issues in play in the community, and members will be aware, because we've previously spoken about it, about how we as a service are working with partners to address those as best as we can. But it is definitely very difficult to make any definitive and strong link between COVID and our actual activity.
I just Chair, I'd like to thank the Fire Authority for the work they've been doing, considering that the risks they've all been putting themselves at.
Thank you.
The impact it's had on their own families. So I'd just like to thank the Fire Authority for that.
Okay, that's been noted, Karen. Go on. Would you like to ask any questions at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Renshaw mentioned a few things that I wanted to say and thank the team as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Hill, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just looking at the table on page 12 and all the incidences and the red and green and everything.
Yeah.
And statistics always mislead if we're not careful. And actually, when we look, the actual activity is down, and it's well down over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So the fact we're doing more rescues, given that there's lesser activity, I would have thought was a good thing, because if there's fewer incidences, but we're managing to rescue more people, in a way you could interpret that as being pretty good, actually. But that was just a comment. And the other one, you mentioned the very unfortunate fire-related deaths, and again, they've shown an increase, and it's shown in red, but these are very, very small figures, aren't they? These, according to this is an increase of, it was 3 last year, and it's 5 this year in the number of people. And actually, for a population of 2.5 million, I wouldn't have thought that was too bad. But await your comment. I mean, of course, every death is a tragedy, isn't it? But the actual rate of that doesn't seem to me to be very excessive.
If I may, through you, Chair, to thank all of the councillors for their comments there and for recognising, yes, actually, particularly what Councillor Hall has just said, yes, there's an absolute truth to that. We are dealing with some very small numbers, and we are dealing with, and I think it's often easy for us to forget this, a long-term trend which sees incident numbers, broadly speaking, heading in the downward and in the right direction. And of course, any fire death is a tragedy and an individual tragedy, but the numbers, if we took them back 10 years, are significantly lower. But it is also, of course, completely appropriate that we keep our focus on it, and keep our aspirations high to make things even better.
Okay, any further questions, anybody? Could I just place this on record then, while Mr. Barnes is actually in the meeting with us? Mr. Barnes, there's a report come out from the DWP to deal with suicides and vulnerable people. I've got a copy of that report for Alison to have a look at. She's the lady I report to all the time. It's a report from the DWP. Suicides are concerned because of the universal credit, and our team may pick up some of the problems there on the suicides, having to get entrances into the homes as well, Mr. Barnes. So I'll pass that information over to Alison, and then you can have a read of it yourself. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 7 then? Okay.
That's me, Chair. So
Page 16, Alison Wood, the Chief Officer. Go on, Alison.
Yeah, so I'll take that one. So normally this report would also include the statement of accounts as well, but I'm sure you're all aware, due to COVID-19, the deadlines for the completion of a statement of accounts has been put back to the 31st of August, and the audit has been pushed back to the 30th of November. So rather than leave a report on the outturn until the statement of accounts is actually finalised, I thought I'd bring it to committee now. So this includes revenue outturn, capital outturn, and also payments of members' allowances, which is required to actually produce by statute. So first of all, revenue expenditures reported quarterly to the Finance Resources Committee. So during the year, we actually moved 2.1 million to contingencies because the assumptions underlying the budget in the first place have actually changed. I'd just like to say this outturn is subject to external audit. So if there is any major changes, I'll report that to committee at a later stage. So the table on page 18 shows that we've actually underspent the revenue budget by 168,000. And what I intend to do is go through the major variances and explain those. So for whole-time employees, there was an underspend of 78,000. Now that is a combination of under and overspending. So the underspending is mainly in relation to people retiring before the due retirement date. So we actually set the budget based on retirement dates. We know from the pension scheme when then the employee will retire, but some employees either decide to extend or actually retire early. So that the underspending is relating to that. There has been an actual overspending on overtime of 233,000, so that has offset some of that underspending. 108,000 was due to the authority supporting neighbouring brigades during the floods last year, and also providing additional resilience in the North Valley and cover at the day crew stations. There's also been an overspend of 27,000 on allowances for the Command Leadership and Management project that started in January. So premises, there's been an overspend of 117,000 on premises expenses. So this is due to property repairs and contract cleaning. So property repairs, this is due to an increase in labour and parts due to increase in inspections and compliance checks. We actually renewed the cleaning contract in December, which has resulted in an increased annual cost of 40,000. There's also been an overspend on utilities of 16,000. Supplies and services has been a large underspend in supplies and services. 142,000 of this is due to savings on ICT and communications, due to savings on fixed landlines and ICT maintenance and support. There's also been a saving of 49,000 on fire prevention and publicity, as that budget is now managed by our central corporate communications team rather than in fire safety. There's also been a reduction in cost of operational equipment of 39,000 and clothing of 88,000, and that can be attributable to the reduction in the number of employees employed. Income, we've actually achieved more income of 539,000. 97,000 of that is in relation to recharging some of the overtime costs regarding to the floods. We've also had increases in income due to special services, secondments and youth training. So transfers to reserves, so automatically any underspends on contingency budgets or capital financing charges and health pensions are automatically transferred to earmarked reserves. So the authority received some COVID-19 grant funding at the end of March of 435,000. The balance unspent of that was 406,000, of which have actually established a new separate earmarked reserve, so we can actually manage that separately aside from normal authority funding. We also received an additional 1.2 million in funding this year, which is due to pensions grant and also business rates retention compensation grant. So in order to keep our capital financing requirements at an affordable level, we've actually used the underspendings on contingencies, capital financing charges, the revenue budget underspend of 168,000, and this increase in additional funding to actually make additional voluntary revenue contributions. So what that does in effect, that reduces our capital financing requirement, and over time actually reduces the burden on the revenue account of financing the capital plan, because I'm sure members are aware we've got a very ambitious capital plan over the next 5 years, which is 25 million. So section 2.2 explains usable reserves. So the reserve strategy is approved every year at Finance and Resources Committee in October, and also it's reviewed at the budget setting process in February. So the table on page 21 shows our usable reserves. So its closing balance of usable reserves was 34,668,000. So we've actually used 1.622 million of usable reserves during the year. So the main ones, we've actually funded the lean working and the procurement review from the service support review, and also we funded the rebuild of Wakefield Fire Station, the purchase of CLM vehicles, also from usable reserves. So we'll move on to capital expenditure. So outturn was just short of 6 million, 5.98 million. The details of that are shown in the table on page 22. So the items of expenditure, so the rebuild of Wakefield Fire Station, which is due to complete late 2020, we spent 1.246 million on that. The purchase of vehicles for the Command and Leadership Management Project, that cost us just short of 800,000. An aerial appliance at Bradford Fire Station cost 640,000. That became operational in March this year. We also implemented a new HR rostering system which went live in January at a cost of 142,000, and also introduced a new type of firefighting jacket which cost 221,000. So we've actually funded this capital expenditure through the sources in the table at the top of page 23. I'd like to point out we've actually used internal funds wholly. We haven't taken out any external borrowing to actually fund this capital expenditure. We haven't actually taken out any external funding since December 2011. And this means the authority has saved £4 million in interest charges by not borrowing externally. So 2.4 highlights treasury management activities during the year. So as long-term outstanding debt at the 31st of March was 45.8 million, and we actually had a final balance of investments of 31.3 million, which generated £307,000 worth of income during the year. So I'm happy to take any questions.
David, would you like to come in on this one? Councillor Hall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah. I've just got a question really about the, bear with me, about the table which shows the underspend for last year. It's on page 18 of the bundle there. Now you referred to the underspend as being little, but actually the difference between the budget and what it came out of was 5.3 million. So that's an awful lot bigger. That surely that's the figure that we need to look on, isn't it, for the underspend rather than hundreds of thousands?
Right, so that's a good question. So as I explained, we actually plan. So any underspendings on contingencies and capital financing charges, we actually budget and forecast the full cost of those and move those to reserves anyway. So we actually set the budget, and any underspending on that we actually automatically move to reserves. So yes, you're correct in what you're saying, Councillor Hall, but taking that into account, we still underspent the budget by 168,000, but that is actually true. We have actually underspent by 5.3 million because we've actually moved some money to earmark reserves.
Are you okay with that, David? Councillor Goa, any questions? Goa, Councillor Goa, can you hear me? Any questions?
Thank you, Chair. No questions so far. Thank you.
No, Chair. Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask, I know that the authority received some added funding for the COVID-19 back in March. I just wondered if there was any thing in the foreseeable future that where the Fire Authority were going to receive any more funding, considering the length of time and the work that's had to be committed to the COVID-19.
Yes.
I always.
Yep, so I'll respond to that. So yeah, the authority received 436 in March. We also received a further 1.7 million of COVID grant funding in April. So that means the total amount of funding we've actually received is 2.1 million, of which we've spent to date just short of $250,000. So we've got quite a lot of grant remaining, which, as I've mentioned, I'm keeping a separate earmark reserve just for governance. The government also announced a couple of weeks ago an extra 500 million, but that is totally to support local government rather than fire. So fire won't be receiving any more of that funding. So yes, in total we've received 2.1 million.
Can I just say that I just think that considering the wide area that the West Yorkshire Fire Authority cover, and considering its vulnerability, I think that, you know, maybe the government could contribute further funding in the future if needed.
Yes, so I reported at Finance Resources Committee a couple of weeks ago about the impact of COVID-19 on the revenue budget next year. So district councils, I'm sure you're aware, actually collect our precept and our share of business rates on our behalf. Based on estimates provided to me by the 5 district councils, it looks as though there could be a 4.3 million collection fund deficit, which the authority may have to find. Now, the government has actually announced as part of the comprehensive spending review, which it launched a couple of weeks ago, that it will actually look into funding and looking at the collection fund deficits reported by councils. And one of the relaxations they've given is that these deficits can be spread over 3 years. So 4.3 million deficit is still a 4.3 million deficit, whether it's spread over 1 year or 3 years. But district councils and obviously fire authorities are hoping that the government will actually look at the size of the collection fund deficits and actually write some of those off as part of the comprehensive spending review. I'll certainly be writing reports, certainly to full authority and finance resources, updating members on the current COVID financial situation.
Could I just draw?
Thank you,
Have you finished, Karen?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Could I just draw people's attention to the members' attention to the top of page 23, where there's been no long-term borrowing since 2011. It's a credit to the financial team the way they've worked here and dealt with the finances of the authority. Well done, Alison and your team. Many thanks.
Okay.
Can we move on then? No more questions? Can we go to page 26? It's Alison, this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a report for the risk management activity and developments, which have been reported to the Risk Management Strategy Group in June this year, and it highlights any future risks or risk-related areas. So, referring to section 2 of the report, the Risk Management Strategy Group met in June this year, There are quarterly meetings that are held, and these are chaired by the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, and Councillor Graham also attends these meetings. So a summary of the key areas. Between the March 2020 and June 2020 meetings, 29 risks have been reviewed by their respective owners. There has been one risk that the likelihood has been reduced, and we have put 2 new risks on our matrix, and they're detailed in the bullet points under 2.2. All of our corporate risks have recently been assessed for the actual and potential impacts of COVID-19, and any impact on the corporate risks will be reviewed at each of the risk management strategy group meetings and also our management team meetings. Risks and issues relating to the UK exiting the EU are currently discussed at each of the risk management strategy group meetings also. Members will recall that we did have a development session which was scheduled for the 20th of April this year, but unfortunately that had to be cancelled. So we will be looking at a rescheduling of that when that's possible to do so. And then the content of that will be reviewed so that we can ensure some of the COVID-19 related areas and examples are included also. Taking members through to 2.3 of the report, there are currently 55 risks that are on our risk management matrix, and those are split between very high, high, medium and low risks, and they're all shown in the table at 2.3. Just below the table, there are details of all of the 5 very high risks for members' attention. I'll happy to take any questions.
Could I come in there, Alison?
Yeah.
Many thanks for your report. It's an excellent report as usual from you and John and that and the team. Page 27, bullet point, it's below 2.2.1.2.1.2.3. Third bullet point, a new risk failure where the Grenfell Tower is concerned. Could I ask the management team to look into actually having a review of this failure where Grenfell Tower is concerned? We've done a lot of work as regarding where Grenfell Tower and the implications of it, part 1 and part 2 is affecting us. It's the building regulations I want to be brought up to date on. I'd like to call a review so we can all have a say about this Grenfell Tower and how it's processing at the moment. Would you take that on board, Alison?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. Dave's in the meeting, so I'm sure Dave will pick that one up. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any questions, Karen? Councillor Renshaw?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. I'd just like to thank the authority for the work that they've done around the water and rescue and the flooding areas, specifically the water areas where the public have been attracted to during the COVID-19 and the social distancing. But I think it would be helpful if the authority advised owners of water areas of what requirements they need in order to make it safe for all people. The authority do a lot of work in the water rescue, and I'd like to thank them for that work that they do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Karen. Councillor Goa, any questions, any points, your comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 28, 2.3, with regards to the table that we've got, risk factor scores going from, from red to amber to green. The figures look quite consistent month in, month out. But, the 5 very high risk categories that are described underneath, they range from, from flooding to terrorist firearms attacks to all sorts, to a digital attack and all that. Would it be possible to have a bit of a breakdown of these numbers, 7, 7, 6, and 5, if possible? Because it's so much. There's so much variant in the risks as well. Just to understand as to which high risks we are specifically talking about, because there's 5 altogether, 5 different risks listed there, and they're all obviously high risks, but they're all so different from each other as well. So,
would you like to come back on that, Alison? Alison?
So are you wanting more detail on each of those risks, Councillor Almas?
Please, if possible, just a breakdown. That's all.
Breakdown on the
Yeah, the risk matrix, don't we?
there's so much variety there, you know, from losing of or reduction in government grants to firearms, to flooding, to all the way to digital attack. So we just want to know which risks are affecting us more. You know, there's so much variety there.
Okay, Dave, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
What I would, if I may, through you, Chair, I think members will recall that whilst we bring this report to every meeting of this particular group, once a year we bring the report accompanied by the full risk matrix to the group as well. At that point, members are shown the risk matrix, which we simply don't bring every meeting because it's complexity and length in short, but it gives each risk a descriptor of it, the control measures that we've put in place, and actually scores it on the likelihood and impact for ourselves. Certainly, if Councillor Amos wants a particular briefing on that, then I'm very happy to do that offline, just to talk through exactly how those scores are made up. Alternatively, we can just wait until the next time it comes around, Alison, and I'm not sure which meeting it will come to, where we present the full risk matrix to members for them to take a look through. Okay,
that normally goes to the September-October meeting with the full matrix.
Thank you. It may be appropriate then, Councillor Amos, that we wait until that meeting, then we'll give the more detailed description of that meeting, if you're content with that.
Well, thank you. Excellent. Yeah, so September, October is not very far anyway, so it would be hopefully the next meeting. So I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go on. Thank you. David, any further points you'd like to make?
Yes, thank you. Just to follow on, actually, from the last question and looking down those very high risk areas, we've been told that since the beginning of the year we've received £2.1 million of extra grant to do with COVID funding from the government, and we haven't spent. Well, we've spent a very small proportion of it, and according to the Finance Committee papers, the public papers from last time, even on a worst case scenario, we weren't expecting to spend the vast majority of it. So with those being the circumstances, with that background, do we still think that loss or reduction in government grant is a very high risk this year?
Yeah, I'll answer that one, Councillor Hall. So this is regarding the revenue support grant and the business rates retention grant, which accounts for 50% of his income. So we've got this comprehensive spending review. Obviously, COVID-19's cost the government, £61 billion. So I don't think they've hid away from the fact that at some point that needs to be repaid. So I've mentioned talks about austerity and increasing tax. So certainly a loss or reduction in government grant is quite significant, really. Bearing in mind that since 2010 we've lost 26 million, the actual ability for us to make any further cuts is quite small, really. So yes, 2.1 million. I would imagine that perhaps as part of the comprehensive spending review, the government may say that any deficits in the collection fund may have to be met from that. But I think what members need to remember is there's some other financial pressures. The Sergeant McLeod case, the pensions remedy. We don't know what financial impact that'll have on the authority. Receive pensions grant funding. That's just been guaranteed on a year-by-year basis, which costs us 4.2 million a year. So we've had no guarantee that's going to be funded by government going forward from the next comprehensive spending review. Obviously, there's a pressure of pay awards. There's a 3% pay award made in the medium-term financial plan. As we know, support staff is 2.75%, but we don't know firefighters. Any 1% over and above the 3% provision is an extra £500,000 to the authority. So I still do see that loss of government grant is a fundamental risk to the authority, and it's number one on the risk matrix is loss of government grant.
You okay with that, David?
Well, just to comment, really, maybe the risk should be an inability to balance the budget, which is a different thing, because given that we underspent last year by £5.3 million, and it's very likely that a lot of our capital projects will be further deferred or not going on this year because of COVID, one would have expected maybe a similar performance this year.
Okay, we'll carry it forward.
Yeah, I mean that's really quite difficult to comment on. As you know, I've got a statutory requirement to achieve a balanced budget anyway. I can't bring a a budget to an authority that's not balanced anyway. So that is my responsibility, and I do, from my professional point of view, see that a loss of government grant is quite significant for the authority.
Okay, Alison, many thanks for that. No further points. Can we move on to page 30, Deloitte, item 9. Are you taking this one, Alison?
No, I'm going to let Paul Hewitson, who was online from Deloitte,
Oh,
take
Paul
that.
is there, isn't he?
He is.
Paul,
Yeah.
yes.
Here I am. Can everyone hear me if I unmuted correctly?
Okay,
Yes,
Paul.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. Obviously, as Alison said at the outset, ordinarily we'd be bringing our ISA 260 to you at this meeting, saying we're finished, you sign the accounts, we'll sign the accounts. But all of that went out the window, and the deadline, as I say in my opening paragraph, has been shifted back to the 30th of November. Obviously, there was a lot of strain on the finance team to pull the accounts together in the circumstances. It wasn't easy. We managed to work constructively with the authority to try and keep as close as possible to the original timescales. There were some delays, and the delivery of the accounts was delayed until the 17th of July, but they did come across on the 17th of July as committed to. So we were able to start our audit in anger at that point. The audit is progressing, shall we say, satisfactorily. Obviously, 17th of July wasn't that long ago, so we are still in the thick of it, but we are making solid progress. And at the minute, we haven't found anything in our work that would stop us hitting the 23rd of October deadline, bringing you an ISA 260. However, the key risk in that we know about at the minute is that we are dependent on the pension fund auditor, the West Yorkshire Pension Fund auditor, completing their work and providing us with clearance on the pension assets. And that is wholly out of our control. So we will obviously liaise with the finance team, let them know as and when that comes in, or if we get any word there's going to be a delay. But from where we sit at the minute, assuming that letter comes in, it doesn't feel like it's a stretch getting us to the 23rd of October. I've put at the bottom there that, you know, there were some delays. We didn't change our staffing because we were told we were going to stick to the original timescales. And picking it up and putting it down does create some inefficiencies. We will do our best to absorb them where we can, and not have to adjust the audit fee for the delays. I think at the minute there are one or two small issues that we're talking to the finance team about overruns on, but they are fairly small issues at the moment. And at the moment, we don't have any major issues or major errors that we need to bring to your attention that are so critical that you really need to know about them now in advance of finalising the audit.
Okay, Paul. Can I just say, can you explain to the members
Certainly.
what the ISA report is that you're intending bringing to the governance unit in the forthcoming months?
Yeah, sorry, curse of the auditors, we assume that everybody else is an accountant. So ISA, you'll hear me say about that an awful lot of times, is the International Standards on Auditing, and 260 is International Standard on Auditing number 260, and that is the one that deals with the reporting by the auditor to those charged with governance. So the standard requires me to communicate to those charged with governance, which at the authority is yourselves as the Audit Committee, all the matters relevant to the audit and relevant to you. So that will be things like the materiality, the significant risks that we tested and how we concluded upon them and what our conclusions were, any audit adjustments that have been reflected if we judge they are so fundamental that you need to understand them in order to understand the accounts preparation process, any unadjusted misstatements that haven't been corrected because management judged that either they don't agree with them or they're not material, so that you know what you are approving in terms of, I am telling you there are these errors in it, but if you still want to sign them off, then go ahead and sign them off, but just be cognizant of the fact that there are these errors in it. And also if there are any management letter points, so through our work, if we identify any weaknesses or improvements that can be made to the control environment, we will bring those to your attention if we feel they are significant enough to bring to the Audit Committee's attention. We will bring anything that we identify that we think is relevant to the attention of the finance team, but in order to keep your agenda more focused on the strategic issues, we only bring the really critical things to the Audit Committee in our ISA 260 report. It also confirms things like independent and the fee level, and often has some stuff in the background about responses to regulators and things like that.
Okay, many thanks, Paul, for that information and the advice that you're giving there. I'd like to read it when it's actually typed out for me, what you actually said there. Any questions from the director or any questions from Mr. Barnes on this particular report? Mr. Barnes?
No, I don't have any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Alison?
That's fine.
No questions, thank you. Okay, can we move on then? Page 31, item 10, revised internal audit plan. Okay.
So hand this to Simon Straker, who's online.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alison.
Simon, isn't it? Simon, yeah.
Good morning. Hope you can all hear me. So this morning we're asking members to approve the revised internal audit plan, which would apply for the remainder of the year. So that's starting on page 35 in the pack. Members may recall the original audit plan was approved at the last meeting on the 24th of April, although I said at that time that we probably would need to revise it as circumstances have developed. So just to outline that internal audit work was suspended about the middle of March, and we've only recently recommenced at the start of this month. So here at Kirklees, audit staff have been seconded to other key duties. Most notably, we've been supporting the small business grant scheme, and indeed some colleagues have been helping on school admissions and various other tasks. Simultaneously, our fire colleagues have been attending to other priorities, and we've all been getting used to working remotely. So that's what we've been doing in the meantime. That being the case, we don't have the capacity to achieve the original plan, and indeed one or two of the risks that we'd included have changed, or the priorities have changed anyway during this time. So as Alison says in a cover report, we've consulted with herself, with the management board and the risk management strategy group, and we've come up with this revised plan, which we've outlined. You'll note that one or two things have dropped off from the original plan, and a couple of new risks that I think have already been mentioned in a previous item have been added in, and they're shown on page 32. So whilst overall it is a reduced level of coverage, I think it is still sufficient to enable me to provide a meaningful opinion on the authority's risk management, governance and internal control arrangements, as I'm required to do under the professional standards that we operate to, and we'll be doing that at year end. You'll have also noted that with reduced coverage there comes a reduction in cost, and that will also factor in work that we haven't been able to do in 1920 as well. So we'll resolve that with Alison towards the end of the year, and also to note that should there be any further change of circumstances, members will obviously just be aware of the new lockdown arrangements in some authorities in West Yorkshire. So nobody can predict exactly what's going to happen in the future. So if there are further impacts on our work, then we'll obviously discuss those with Alison and come back to the committee to report accordingly. So that's my summary, Chair. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them there.
Okay, Simon, many thanks for your report. As usual, it's very interesting to read your reports. As regarding the capacity to fulfil the obligation with the service level agreement, then what was the problem there?
Well, it was partly a fact that our audit staff needed to do other things within Kirklees Council. As I've mentioned, we spent a lot of time supporting the payments to locally to small businesses, and we've also been asked to help it fill gaps in other important operations like school admissions for the next academic year. And then as I've said, initially we were conscious of the fact that our fire colleagues were having to prioritise other things than sorting us out and helping with our audits. And well, we've simply all been getting used to how to do our day job working remotely. So all those factors meant that for a period of about 3 months, we haven't been able to do any meaningful internal audit work.
Okay, Simon, I'll put it to the members now, Simon. Any questions from the members who would like to take the lead on it? Anybody?
Karen, could be all.
David, is it?
Yeah, Karen and David.
Any members' comments, questions? David?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think really, everybody's doing a great job and the best they can under the circumstances. There's obviously been disruption this year and likely more to come. So I think we accept this as the best audit plan that can be achieved, and thank officers for showing the flexibility during this year and coping with what they have so far.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Simon, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, thank Councillor Hall for his comments. Yes, we're conscious of the fact that flexibility is the key, and we'll aim to do the most important and key things that we can. Some things might attract a lesser focus perhaps than in a normal year, but we'll endeavour to do all the things that we absolutely have to, and to the best of our ability.
Okay. Any further points, David, before I move on? No? Okay, go on. Karen, would you like to comment?
I'd just like to read. Oh, sorry. It's helpful to see the collaborative working that's gone on. Oh, sorry, I keep going muting. I'll repeat that. I'll start again. I'm just reiterating lots of what Councillor Hall said, but it's also helpful to know that you've been doing collaborative work, prioritising other areas within citywide issues, while at the same time having such faith in Alison back at the Fire Authority. So I'd like to thank you all really as a team, and it just shows the collaborative team working that you are all doing. Thank you.
Okay, go on. Any questions or points you'd like to make? Councillor, go on.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fine with that. Thank you.
No questions. Okay. Could I just draw Mr. Banks to the question on governance where the GDPR is concerned? Where are we now with the GDPR?
With the GDPR, Chair? Well, it's a little bit like painting the Forth Bridge. It's something that we constantly implement and comply with.
It's an extensive problem there, a big problem there with regards to the Data Protection Act as well. So, Mr. Barnes, is that still in abeyance then, the way you've operated as regarding management, withholding it back until you get more information, is it?
Sorry, I'm not quite following the
where the GDPR is concerned. Is it because of the information that it will require to deliver the actual goods at the end of the day?
Oh, no, sorry. I think this is about having a sort of audit of our compliance, which is, it was going to be carried out this year, but for a variety of reasons, and COVID's one of them, but not the only one, it was something we agreed would be put back with audit. We are, how can I put this? We endeavour to fully comply with it. This is about the audit process of confirming that. Okay, thank you. We've got that recorded. Alison, any further points you'd like to make on this particular item?
No, fine, thank you.
Could I say that's the end of the agenda then, isn't it, Alison? Okay. Could I just say thank you for everybody for their opportunity to speak this morning by remote control and what have you. I was a bit flustered at the beginning because I didn't know where the hell I was going actually, but many thanks for everybody who's taken part. And Paul, thank you for your report as well. Alison, thank you. And all the councillors, many thanks. And Dave, as usual, professional to the top of the list. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Take care.
We will now be closing down. Okay, thank you.
Bye.